Hassan El-Tayyab is the Legislative Director for Middle East Policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. Hassan, thank you so much for your time. I'm thinking cautious optimism may be an appropriate phrase. You tell us.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's welcome news that we may see a reprieve in the violence and genocide in Gaza after 2 horrific years of violence, where close to 70,000 Palestinians have died. So many more have been injured. And we are now seeing a phase 5 famine because of a lack of aid access due to these Israeli restrictions on aid trucks that are literally waiting at the border. I think the devils are definitely in the details. We've been here before. We've seen that these agreements can be very fragile and can break down at literally any time. We've also seen Israel violate the ceasefire that they agreed to in Lebanon literally thousands of times. And we've seen just more and more airstrikes. So, I would say, we welcome any chance of ending this genocide and getting hostages home and, moving forward. But I think it's really about what happens in the next days, weeks, months to make sure that this actually sticks. The terms are incredibly vague. Whatever Hamas has agreed to really hasn't been published yet. They have agreed to the first phase to free hostages in exchange for humanitarian aid and the end to the bombardment. But again, we don't know what's going to happen. I think it's critical to say a few things, though. One is that aid should never have been a bargaining chip in the first place. Under international law, civilians in Gaza deserve the right to have humanitarian aid. They deserve the right to not have their hospitals bombed, not have their schools bombed, and not have their healthcare infrastructure absolutely decimated. They never deserve to have any of this happen to them, and it's an absolute tragedy. So, again, we have to double down on diplomacy to try to end this once and for all. For our part on the international community side, we have to make sure that we block these offensive weapons and make it absolutely clear that the Israeli government is not going to be having more U.S. weapons to continue violating ceasefire agreements, make sure they stay at the diplomacy table. We also need the international community to prioritize safeguards and guarantees, because who's to say once Hamas and Palestinians, once those hostages are released, what's going to happen after that? And that's the big question we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely 100% correct, Hassan. What about this issue then of Hamas and the insistence that it disarm? At some stage, the group will not be involved in the governance of Gaza, but presumably it would want to survive as an entity, even if most of its members take up the offer of amnesty and leave Gaza. As a philosophical and physical entity, Hamas would want to keep going, right?
Yeah, and exactly that's right. So future talks are supposed to address demilitarization and these foreign troop deployments, but Hamas has only agreed to discuss those issues alongside other Palestinian factions. They haven't accepted them. They haven't rejected them. So some reports even suggest that Hamas might be given amnesty for folks who commit to peaceful coexistence. And we don't know where this is going to go. I think really the bottom line is that we need Palestinians at the table. We need the full scope of Palestinian civil society represented. And I think that is what's going to lead us away from the violence and genocide that we've seen, self-determination, elections, a seat at the table, which unfortunately they were not given when the 20-point plan was presented by the United States and Israel. I think that all these things can be negotiated. I think, I believe that there's a way forward where there's different governance structures. I think Hamas has been pretty clear that they're open to that. But again, this is a collective decision. Palestinians need to be at the table, and we need to address these long-standing issues, or we're going to end up right back where we've been October 6th and even prior. And that was, again, no self-determination, no sovereignty, continued occupation, and no real horizon horizon for Palestinians to be able to chart their own future and to achieve their own dreams. I think if you look at the tenets of the 20-point ceasefire deal, you see just a whole bunch of things that are again, very vague, that could be pitfalls in the future. Things like, what's the future of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in the Gaza Strip, where we've seen all these aid sites just be these death traps where Palestinian civilians are being killed as they're trying to get humanitarian aid. We've seen these sketchy terms around the PA being able to, be back in Gaza to govern, but it's unclear, do they have to give up their cases at the International Criminal Court, the ICJ? That sets a horrific precedent. And again, these safeguards around what happens after the hostages are released and where the Israeli occupation and military front will be. I think there's just so much that we don't know. For what it's part, Friends Committee on National Legislation and a lot of our allies in Congress, on Capitol Hill and around the country, we're laser focused on trying to get aid in and block the weapons. I will say there's a great piece of legislation that we're very focused on right now, introduced by Representative Ramirez from Illinois. And that is designed to block these offensive weapons, the 2,000-pound bombs, the 1,000-pound diameter bombs, joint direct attack munitions, and all of these weapons that we've seen be used over and over and over again in Gaza. We have 55 co-sponsors, and we also had a historic vote in the Senate just in July, late July, by Senator Bernie Sanders. That was supported by a majority of Senate Democrats, 27 to be precise, and we want to build on that progress and make sure that these weapons are not being used to violate international law or U.S. law, like this Section 620I of the Foreign Assistance Act. So again, lots of unknowns right now, but we got to stay laser focused on making sure that we have humanitarian aid into Gaza and that we don't have more weapons being used to violate fundamental human rights protected by international law.
Okay, so here's a critical point again that you raised, Hassan. This goes well beyond the politics. The politics are obviously the basis from which decisions are made, but you've pinpointed the fate of real people, of the Palestinian civilians, what their lives will be, whether they'll still continue to be under threat. And you see the pictures that while we're talking to you, and you've seen them for the past 2 years. Gaza is going to take years and years and years to redevelop. There are going to be 2.1 million people being moved around the enclave while certain areas are redeveloped. They'll still be possibly living in temporary accommodation. When a human being endures that much suffering, nothing compared to obviously bombs and bullets, but when life is hard, complaints increase, difficulties make people more impatient. This is going to last for years, the delicate situation possibly, because of the destruction in Gaza.
Yeah, this is just the beginning. If and when the ceasefire deal comes into fruition, like you were saying, this is just the beginning on a long road to healing. The next step, in my opinion, is getting the United Nations, the Security Council, and the General Assembly to lock this in with international guarantees. That's absolutely critical as a first step to make sure we don't go right back to where we've been once the hostages are released. We need safeguards to make this bombardment stop and to ensure that the UN and groups like UNRWA, the World Food Program, World Central Kitchen, all these incredible doctors have access to really do the medical treatments that are absolutely necessary for so many Palestinians right now, suffering from famine, malnutrition, suffering from a number of diseases, and the aid needs to flow freely. We also need to see accountability. We've seen war crime after war crime after war crime, and the Israeli government use U.S. weapons to bomb civilians and civilian infrastructure. If we don't see accountability, if we don't see reparations, tribunals, sanctions, what's to say this isn't going to happen again? And so again, on our part, we need to keep pushing the block these offensive weapons to make sure that we don't go back to the violent, 2 years that we've seen this ongoing genocide, and that we move forward by allowing the United Nations full access, allowing doctors full access, and allowing journalists full access. The speaker that you just had on from Gaza, absolutely heartbreaking. Those journalists are absolute heroes. We also need the international community to be able to be allowed in and to do this reporting to make sure that what has happened over the past 2 years is really understood by the world community, and that we seek accountability again so it doesn't happen again. My heart goes out to every single Palestinian right now in Gaza, Palestinians around the world, for all that they've endured. The samud is the word, the absolute strength that we've seen, the persistence in such hardship, but it's going to take a long time. And like you said, we are just at the beginning of this.
Hassan El-Tayyab, thank you so much indeed for your time, Hassan.